This is video number 1 for the extra review that I gave you for the Chapter 4A test. First question, what degree measure is equivalent to 7 pi divided by 15 when you're going from radians to degrees? We multiply by 180 over pi. So I've got 7 pi over 15 times 180 divided by pi. The pi's cancel, and I'm left with 7 times 180 divided by 15. So I just put that into my calculator, 7 times 180. I get 1,260, and I divide by 15, and I get 84 degrees. All right, number 2. To the nearest thousandth, remember that that's 3 decimals. What radian measure is equivalent to 310 degrees? All right, so this time I'm going from degrees and converting to radians. So I'm going to multiply by pi over 180. So I've got 310, and I multiply by pi over 180. And because it says to the nearest thousandth, I'm just going to do this on my calculator, 310 times pi. And then I'm going to divide by 180, and I get 5.411. Okay, number 3, a neighborhood carnival has a Ferris wheel, which is circular, with a diameter of 80. All right, that means the radius is 40, because diameter is the full distance from across the circle. The wheel rotates 10.7 radians per minute. How far? That means arc length. In feet, will the seated passenger travel in 6 minutes? So I want the fraction of the circle times capital C, which stands for circumference. Okay, so my arc length, which I don't know, my fraction of the circle, let's see, I've got 10.7 radians per minute for 6 minutes, 10.7 radians per minute for 6 minutes. And when I multiply that, so the minutes cancel, 10.7 times 6, I get 64.2, so it's 64.2 radians. Okay, so 64.2 radians out of 2 pi. It's a fraction of the circle. The whole circle is 2 pi, and I have 64.2 out of 2 pi times circumference. Circumference is 2 pi times the radius of 40. The 2 pi's cancel, and I'm simply going to take 64.2 times 40, and when I do that, I get 2,568 feet. A 15-inch windshield wiper blade starts at a horizontal resting position, and it swipes upward on an arc at an angle of 130 degrees. So when I think about a windshield wiper, I kind of think of it like that. And the arc is 130 degrees. To the nearest hundredth, that's going to be 2 decimals. How many square inches of the windshield surface? Square inches surface. We're talking area here. Does the blade cover on any given swipe? So I'm looking at area of a sector, which is still fraction of the circle times area of the circle. My fraction is 130 degrees out of 360. In this problem, I did divide it by 2 pi because it was in radians. Excuse me. Here I do it divided by 360 because it's in degrees. Times area is pi times the radius squared. And since the length of the windshield wiper, which is right here, is 15, that would be times 15 squared. So I'm going to put all of this into my calculator. 130 times pi times 15 squared. Get that answer. So we put it in your calculator, divide by 360, and I get 255.25 inches squared. All right, to the nearest thousandth, evaluate each of the following. All right, so since I'm going to the nearest thousandth, that's 3 decimals. And so I'm going to put these into my calculator. My calculator needs to be in radians. For number 1, it needs to be in degrees. For number 2, and it needs to be in radians for number 3, because what I'm doing is, this doesn't have a degree, that means it must be radians. So I'm going to do these two together, and I'm going to put my calculator into the radian mode. So I go to mode, I go down to radian, and I hit enter. And when I do sine of 3 pi divided by 11, I get 0.756. I'm going to go ahead and do number 3 while my calculator's in radians. And I put tangent of 5, and I get negative 3.381. Now I'm going to go to mode, go down to degrees, and hit enter, and then hit cosine of 142, and I get negative 0.788. Number 6. If the cosine of theta is 2 square root of 3 over 5, and theta is, this means quadrant 1 from 0 to pi over 2, and in quadrant 1, where everything is positive, find the exact value for the sine. I know that the answer should be positive because I'm in quadrant 1. I'm going to use my Pythagorean identity theorem. I know the cosine, 2 square root of 3 over 5 squared plus sine squared equals 1. When I square everything inside those parentheses, I get 4 times 3, because the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. 5 squared is 25, plus sine squared of theta equals 25 over 25. 4 times 3 is 12. I'm just going to erase it and write 12. Now I'm going to subtract 12 25ths from each side, and I get sine squared of theta equals 13 25ths. And I take the square root, and I get sine of theta is, I only need the positive root, because sine is positive in quadrant 1, the square root of 13 over 5, and that cannot be simplified because there's no perfect squares in 13, so that's my final answer. Number 7. I'll give you the sine of theta, and I tell you that it's in, this would be quadrant 2, because pi over 2 to pi is this quadrant here, and I ask you to find the tangent. In quadrant 2, the tangent is negative. So whatever answer I put for number 7, it needs to be negative. All right. So sine of theta is 3/7. I'm going to go ahead and use my cosine squared plus my sine squared equals 1. Cosine squared plus 3/7 squared equals 1. So cosine squared plus 9/49 equals 49/49. I'm going to subtract that 9/49 from each side, and I'm left with 40/49. I take the square root. Cosine of theta equals, it could be plus or minus, but in this quadrant, cosine would be negative. But it really doesn't matter. The sign doesn't really matter because I already know that my final answer up here needs to be negative. So I'm not going to bother myself with signs right now. I get the square root of 40/7. And I recognize right away that 40 has a perfect square in it. 40 could be rewritten as the square root of 4 times 10, which is 2 square root of 10. So I get 2 square root of 10 all over 7. Alright, and I've done a lot of work, so it feels like I should be done, but notice I want the tangent, I don't want the cosine, and tangent is sine over cosine, so the tangent, which is sine over cosine, is going to be 3/7 divided by 2 square root of 10 over 7. So I get 3/7 times 7 over 2 square root of 10. The 7's cancel. And I'm left with 3 over 2 square root of 10. Well, I can't leave that square root in the bottom, so I multiply by the square root of 10 over the square root of 10, and I end up with 3 square root of 10 all over 2 times 10, or 20. But remember, that has to be negative. So my final answer is negative 3 square root of 10 all over 20. Alright, so make sure you did all your simplifying. Make sure you understand that here I have 3 times the square root of 10, and then on the bottom I have 2 times, this ends up being 10, 2 times 10, that's where I got the 20 from. Alright, number 8. If the cosine of 148, okay, let me think where that would be. 148 would be in this quadrant here. So I'm in this quadrant. Is negative 0.848. What other angle measure between 0 and 360 has the same cosine value? Okay, I want same cosine value. So I know that this is 148. And I need to think, where else is cosine negative? That would be over here. So this is the other angle that I'm looking for, because this is also where cosine is negative. Alright, well, I got to figure out what this angle is. Well, I know these two together have to add up to 180. So 180 minus the 148, that would be 32 degrees. This is 32 degrees. And this angle here is 32 plus 180. 212 degrees, so that's my answer, 212 degrees. And we'll turn to the other side, and we'll do that in the next video.